Good evening all and welcome to Hotel Le Mort. Before I check you in, why not sit down a while, as I regale you with some scary stories from our fine establishment. Be warned though, you might be able to check in, but some guests never check out. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Many years ago, I used to work the night shift at a hotel in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. During the season it wasn't so bad, mostly families and stuff. We had on-site security too. However, in the off-season, the winter months were different. The cheap weekly rates we'd offer attracted a lot of creepy people. The idea was supposed to be making money in the off-season by renting to what is known as snowbirds. Older retired people who came to the beach for a month, through winter. It did not always work out that way though. The cheap rates made it possible for a less than desirable element to become a long-term resident. I've discovered more than my fair share of meth labs, broken up physical assaults, and more during the winter months. Working third shift, I would meet some interesting people. The cold weather would mean some homeless people would come in and get warm and grab a free cup of coffee. I wasn't supposed to let them in, but it's not in me to be cruel. I would let them grab a coffee and get warm for a minute, as long as they didn't cause trouble. As you can see, the night shift in the winter made for some crazy and sometimes creepy stories. I have a lot of them, but this one stands out because it didn't end up well for me. In fact, I had agreed to come in an hour earlier the next night for the young lady that worked second shift in exchange for her working an hour late for me on this night, so that I could enjoy the wrestling show. Ironically enough, I met Terry Funk that night, a wrestling legend known for his hardcore and bloody matches. Little did I know, I was about to experience this kind of violence for real. I was supposed to be there at midnight due to her working over an hour for me. I normally come in at 11 p.m. I counted the register and she briefed me on her shift as to what had happened as per usual. As she was leaving, my friend Andrew pulled up. He worked second shift maintenance at the hotel and the other two hotels our company owned. He would regularly stop by after work, grab us some food, and we would play World of Warcraft on our laptops after eating for a while since business was so slow. He was just getting my money and ordering food and getting ready to leave. I was excited telling him about how much fun I had at the wrestling show and was showing him my Terry Funk t-shirt that I was so proud of. I was just walking back to the office to put the shirt up when I heard the doorbell, indicating a customer had entered. It is true what they say. Not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. I had turned around when I heard someone say something loudly, but I still couldn't make out what they had said. I had just reached the doorway when I saw Andrew fall down in front of me. The next thing I know, a guy walks around the corner and punches me in the head with a short steel pipe in his hand. It staggered me and I went down to one knee. The next thing I know, he hits me in the head with the pipe. The next thing I know, I hear the other guy who I hadn't noticed in this moment, saying that I got away to get a cop. They left out the door. I was finally able to get to my feet. I tried to call the police from the phone in the back office, but it was having issues. I slammed it in frustration. I was hurting and scared and really freaking out. I realized that they could come back, so I ran and locked the door. I didn't know where Andrew had gone, and that worried me. I called 911. Blood had started pouring down my head, and I told the operator I had been attacked and needed an officer and an ambulance. They called the other hotel we ran and let the night manager called Travis, who was all over 3 properties, know what happened. He thought I was messing with him at first, because when we got bored we would prank each other. I finally convinced him I wasn't joking. He was going to lock up and come down. The cops and ambulance pulled up, and I opened the door. It was at this time that I found out, after they sucker punched and punched him and then knocked him down, Andrew was able to amazingly jump over the desk and escape just as a cop was driving by, which he ran to flag down for help. I ended up in the ER where I had to have 10 staples in my scalp and they gave me morphine for pain. I had no way to get home after being treated, but the doctor and nurses took pity on me and paid for a cab. My plan was to go back to work because this was December and Christmas was coming. I had 3 kids and needed all the hours I could get. When I got back to the hotel, the IT guy Ted was there with his wife Barbara, who also worked at the front desk. She was shocked to see me. She thought I would still be in the hospital. I thought I had only been hit in the head after being punched. The video which Ted was pulling from the police showed a different story. After I went to one knee, the guy had hit me not just 1, but 10 times. I kept trying to grab the pipe and get up for some reason. I don't remember that. I guess I was out on my feet. He kept punching me and hitting me with the pipe till his friend tells him that Andrew got away and got the cops. The 2 of them then ran out. I was given a room at the other hotel and Ted and Barbara gave me a lift there as I was in no condition to drive due to morphine. They also gave me a paid week off to heal up. They switched me over to the other hotel on night shift for a month just in case they were after me in particular. We never found out why they chose to attack me. The police thought it might be a failed armed robbery due to Andrew getting away and me just not going down. It shook me up though, not knowing. Even though I was at the other hotel when I came back to work the night shift, I was still nervous. Every time the door chimed, I tensed up. I couldn't afford to quit though. As I said, I had 3 kids I was supporting. They never caught the guys as far as I know. A detective stopped about 2 months later when I was working second, and he showed me several mugshots and asked me if any of them looked familiar. I never got a great look at them, as it all happened so fast. I had seen the video which wasn't the best quality. Even so, 2 of them looked very familiar. I pointed them out, and he asked me how sure I was. I told him honestly like 85%. He then yells and asks me if I wanted someone to go to jail for an attempted murder on 85%. And I was stunned into silence. I was the victim. I was attacked for no reason and he was yelling at me. It's my fault I was too busy being attacked to get a good look at them. I no longer work at the hotel on night shift, and I'm glad, because it turns out it's just too dangerous in that area. It was 2008. My daughter was 16 and an all-star cheerleader, which meant that we traveled for competitions all across the US. We were living in Maryland at the time and heading to Ohio. I decided to drive instead of fly. It was way cheaper. We would drive the first 8 hours or so, cross the border into Ohio and stay in a hotel. Then we'd get up early and drive 2 hours to the competition. The hotel was only a few years old, a Marriott, and as soon as we entered the room, my daughter looked around and headed to the bathroom, walked out and said, "I don't like this room." So of course, I'm mum and mention how new the hotel is and that it was nice and clean and comfortable. Honestly, I didn't understand. I couldn't understand why she didn't like it, because that's all she said several times. Anyway, we went to eat and came back to go to bed. Again, she's saying she doesn't like the room, and I'm thinking, ugh, teenagers. And oddly, she's using the bathroom with the door open and telling me not to walk over. Again, teenagers. As usual, I watch TV until I fall asleep. She is already asleep. I wish I could fall asleep that fast. Later, I turn the TV off and prepare myself to fall asleep when I hear her rustle in those crisp new sheets. Then again, it was loud, crisp, almost like a whooshing sound. I figured she was pulling those tightly tucked sheets out. I'm laying on my left side, her bed on my right, when the whooshing happens again loudly. So I turn to see what she's doing when I hear the whoosh going straight up between our beds, crisp as can be. And there, between our beds, is what I think is my daughter standing with the sheets over her head. What the heck is she doing, I'm thinking. I quickly realize it can't be her, because it's almost to the ceiling, and there's nothing under this sheet-like thin human structure, when suddenly it drops to the floor fast, making a swooshing sound, and it did it with a ripping effect. All of the white plummeting down. I was so freaked out. I sat up super fast, scared, confused, turning the light on, and there Christine was sleeping in her bed. I didn't know what to do. I turned the TV on, and when it was fully illuminated, I turned off the light as I was starting to wake her up. I was frozen in my bed. There was no way I was going to look around at that point. The TV would stay on all night, I was so afraid. My heart was pounding and my breath erratic, and it took me a while to calm down. I stayed awake a long time, my eyes constantly surveying the room. When I finally fell asleep, a depression on the corner of my bed, like someone sitting down, woke me. I didn't move much, just my eyes. I was scared and very cautious. I thought maybe it was Chrissy, but nothing was there. Again, I'm awake, then fall back to sleep. Early in the morning, before the alarm would sound, I felt someone bending down to me. Like, you can feel without hearing it type of movement, and then a kiss planted on my cheek. I froze, popped open my eyes, and nothing was there. It wasn't my daughter. At that point, it was time to leave, so I woke my daughter and said something to the effect of, "Good, I'm ready to go." We went to the lobby with our bags, got breakfast, as it was 6 a.m. While we're at the table, she says to me that she had a terrible night's sleep and that I kept her up. Now I feel bad and apologized for the TV. When she asks me, why did I keep sitting on the end of her bed during the night, and why did I kiss her on the cheek in the morning? Excuse me, what? It happened to her too. We sat there discussing what the depression felt like, the kiss, a man, and I think she thought I was messing with her. So I told her about the crisp sheet thing rising and falling when she blurts out, "I told you I didn't like the room. I knew it was bad." It was at that point that I realized why she didn't like the room. Not because she was a moody teenager, but because she felt something that I did not. She told me when she walked into the bathroom right away, she felt as if someone had died in there, that they took their own life, that it was dark and foreboding, and that's why she wouldn't close the door when she was in there. But what she hadn't clarified to me was why she hated the room so much. Honestly, she'd have just told me I'd have changed rooms, but here's an even creepier part. After we discussed this, I see a girl at the front desk and decide to go over and ask her if the hotel is haunted. Now, this was a new hotel, but I did anyway. The clerk said, "Which room are you in?" I answered and she stood still, looked at me and walked into the back room and never came out again. I stood there for 5 minutes. Nothing. We gathered our things to leave and she still hadn't come out. When we were walking out the sliding doors, I saw her peek her head out and pop it in again quickly. It was so bizarre. Was she messing with me? Who knows? I don't have a lot of paranormal experiences, but the one I have had did stick with me. It didn't feel like any foreboding or darkness in that room. It simply scared the crap out of me. Chrissy definitely locked into something I couldn't sense upon arrival, and I've always thought myself to be sensitive. I've told this story to many people, but Chrissy does not like hearing it at all. She doesn't discuss it. To her, it's over and done. But the truth is, we know it scared the daylights out of her too, which is why she doesn't want to relive it. Marriott does not own that property anymore. I looked it up on their website. I don't know why. Maybe, just maybe, too many stories have come from that hotel. I used to work in audiovisual in Chicago, where I was assigned a night gala at the esteemed Astoria Hotel set in the opulent Grand Magnolia Ballroom. Legends whispered about a tragic tale involving a woman who met her demise by leaping from the hotel's heights, supposedly after discovering her husband's affair in the very same area. As I sat up alone amidst the grandeur, I couldn't shake off the chilling atmosphere. My tasks seemed routine at first, placing speakers and monitors, but then the inexplicable began to unfold. One by one, my monitors were mysteriously unplugged from the wall sockets. I shrugged off the occurrences initially, attributing them to technical glitches or mere coincidence. Yet as I secured them with tape to prevent further disturbance, a spine-tingling event occurred. As I was on the cusp of completing the setup, all 6 monitors simultaneously detached from the walls, defying logic. A surge of fear gripped me like never before, propelling me to flee the room in terror. Although I returned to fulfill my duties and complete the show, my nerves remained on edge. Hastening through the tasks and avoiding lingering in the empty ballroom, I ensured to leave before the banquet concluded, unwilling to face solitude once more. This took place on October 1st, 2021. We go to Las Vegas frequently because we only live a few hours away in California, and we were heading there for a typical excursion. I enjoy trying new food or staying at a different hotel each time. Over the years, we've stayed at nearly every hotel on the Strip. Some of these hotels are decades old, dating back to the 40s, 50s, and 60s, so understandably we've witnessed the occasional strange noise, smell, or bump in the night. But the strangest thing that ever happened was the newest addition. Resorts World opened in June of 2021, and I was excited to stay there because it was something genuinely new for both of us. It was also our first time traveling post-pandemic, so we spurged a little and stayed at the Comrade side of the hotel, which was marketed as an affordable luxury hotel. It was a beautiful room with all new technology embedded into the room to make things convenient and fun. I couldn't have been more pleased with the room. We unpacked, explored the resort downstairs a bit and did some gambling, ate dinner, and then I headed up to the room to get ready for bed. While I did that, my boyfriend stayed downstairs at the resort to do some more gambling and drinking. He usually stays up a lot later than me, so this was pretty normal. While I was laying in bed on my phone, I started to hear noises. Most of the noises were common hotel noises like pipes in the walls, bumps from the floor above, plumbing, and then another room start their shower, standard stuff. But some of the noises were not normal. Mainly I could hear creaking from the bathroom as if someone was there standing or walking, almost like they were standing at the sink getting ready for bed, moving around like a normal person. I didn't really notice it though, until the sounds started to move towards me. Leaving the bathroom and moving into the bedroom, it sounded like footsteps approaching, but they were slow and uneven. I looked up from my phone and didn't see anything. I reasoned with myself that it was nothing, but something was off. It just felt off. Like I said before, we came to Las Vegas frequently, and we've stayed at nearly every hotel, but I've never felt creeped out like this. Even though my mind was being rational, it's just the floor, it's nothing. My heart rate was going up. I had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't control it. It was like something was in the room with me, giving me a terrible feeling. I stared into the darkness for a few minutes and could still hear the steps coming closer. I was staring right at it, but there was nothing there. They were moving so slowly, and they were approaching the foot of the bed. I could feel the goosebumps. I couldn't even blink. The footsteps stopped at the foot of the bed, and then the room fell eerily quiet, completely silent. But whatever it was still there. It was at the foot of the bed, just there. Was it watching me? What were its intentions? My phone frozen in my hand. I didn't even want to look away. I was so scared. I don't know how much time passed. I was just staring at the empty, silent hotel room. But eventually I managed to text my boyfriend and ask for him to come up, that I was getting spooked by myself. He said he would. This gave me some comfort, and I tried to get my courage back to calm down. I could hear common hotel sounds again, and that was comforting too. Perhaps the thing left while I distracted myself. When my boyfriend came to the room, he teased me for being spooked. We had a laugh and he got ready for bed, and I felt better, and mostly forgot about what happened. I think we both agreed the noises were just because the hotel was new and hadn't been lived in very much. However, one thing we both feared in every Las Vegas hotel was a break-in. So my boyfriend put his giant hydro flask water bottle in front of the entry door. We do this at every hotel, so that if someone tries to sneak in, which happens a lot in Las Vegas, they would knock over the loud water bottle and startle us awake. Finally, we both went to sleep. I was fast asleep when something jolted me awake. It was my boyfriend thrashing out of bed, throwing the covers back, yelling, "Hello? Who's there?" He rushed his feet and headed straight for the entry door. I was still half asleep and asked, "Huh?" I was squinting because the room was very bright now, but my boyfriend looked distraught and didn't answer. He went to the bathroom, checked behind the door, the closet, the couch area. It was obvious something had spooked him. "What happened? The lights turned on. Did you do that?" "No. Maybe you bumped them in your sleep?" "No. They all came on." Something, somehow, had triggered all the lights in our hotel room to turn on in the middle of the night. The bathroom, the bedroom, the little hallway in front of the door, everything. What could have possibly switched on all the lights at once? We sat in confusion for a few moments. Then I tried to think clearly. Did someone try to break into the room? No. The stuff in front of the door hadn't been moved. The water bottle was still upright. Was there a master button you could press that turned everything on? No. Were there two separate master buttons, one for the bedroom and one for the bathroom? Maybe it was a wiring issue. After all, it was a new hotel. Perhaps that sort of thing happens. We decided to call front desk. We weren't even sure what to say to the clerk on the phone, so we just told her all the lights had turned on and woken us up, and that we hadn't pressed any of our light switches. She herself sounded pretty confused and asked if we wanted someone to be sent up to take a look at it. At this point it was 3 or 4 in the morning, so we said no. She said okay, and took note of our call and wrote down the issue. We hung up, sat in silence for a while as we were both creeped out, but did our best to go back to sleep. The next day we spoke about what happened, but we couldn't come to any definite conclusion. To this day I'm still puzzled by it. The front desk never contacted us to tell us how the issue was resolved. It may very well be that the new hotel was still working out its wiring. But what were those eerie footsteps coming towards me in the middle of the night? Was it a phantom messing with us? I wish I remembered the room number, so that I can request never to stay in there again. You know, just in case. My brother used to work in housekeeping at a historic inn. He told me on various occasions he would be trying to clean when he'd see something out of the corner of his eye or in a mirror. Beds would untuck themselves when he turned his back, and on several occasions he'd hear footsteps behind him, but when he turned to look there'd be no one there. He'd be vacuuming the floors and carpets for the machine to suddenly turn off. Sometimes when he was around a corner, he assumed that the cord had snagged, but there'd be several times where the cord had just simply been unplugged from the wall and not been pulled at all. It became too much for him, and one day he worked up the courage to speak about it with his manager. When he did, she just replied, "Oh, ignore that. It's happened forever." Not exactly the words of comfort he wanted to hear, but there you go. I'm a 22-year-old male, and I live in a large city in the Midwest. I drive Lyft while putting myself through trade school. I drive for other similar companies, but that's besides the point. It was Christmas Eve of 2020, and I was running Lyft for a few hours before heading to my mum's with my new baby and wife. Nothing special going on for the night, just the usual. When I get a ride request. It was a pickup from this kind of lower-income apartment complex. No big deal. I arrive, I find my passenger, and he has all of his belongings, several boxes of stuff. Now my car is a 2006 Chevy Impala, so it's not too big. We get all of his stuff loaded up, barely, and are on our way. During the ride, he's crying, saying his girlfriend was cheating on him, and he had walked in on them earlier that night. He couldn't stay there because the lease was in her name. So I was taking him to a hotel. Now in my city, we have a street that is well known for its vices, be it sex workers, drugs, gangs, weapons, seedy motels, the works. We get to the motel, and he asks for me to wait for him to check in and get his key. No problem, man. I'll confess I break the rules a little when it came to lift. I had a gun hidden in a concealed holster, secured to the underside of my driver's seat for protection. Reasons being lift and other contract apps, I've had knives and guns pulled on me, as well as people try to fight me, rob me, and all other kinds of things. But those are stories for another time. The motel happened to be on this seedy street I just mentioned. Homeless people were everywhere, and there was a dude on the far corner of the complex that still had a needle in his arm, passed out against a building. I'm a big fan of true crime, so I'm on edge. He gets his key. The whole motel is ground level, so I help the guy out, and I drive to his door. As I just said, the guy had a lot of stuff, so I started helping him unload his stuff. While on my second trip to get the things, I saw a guy come out of a room just to the south of my car, followed by two ladies. They came up to the room I was next to, and one of the ladies pounded on the door to open up. That was when I saw the guy raise up a shotgun out of the long coat and storm into the room, and the two ladies followed him, slamming the door behind them. Following, I heard a lot of yelling and shouting and was just waiting for shots to ring out. Out of nowhere, my passenger came up behind me. "I can take this, man. Go ahead and take off. Have a Merry Christmas," he said, and he gave me a cash tip. I didn't even notice he took all the boxes out my hand or slid a $5 into my pocket. I was frozen. I knew what may have been going down in that room. I had to leave, or at least get to where I could get my own gun. I knew the guy, and both ladies saw me, and I know they know I saw the gun. I had to get out. No witnesses. I got into my car and sped away quickly. I got a block or so away and called the cops, and gave them every detail. After I got off the phone with the police, I signed out a lift. I hadn't made much money, but I was done. I got a call later that night. The cops investigated. They never found the gunman or the women, and the occupants of the room they went into said nothing happened and that I was full of crap. Well, I know what I saw. Better to be safe than sorry. I have a story to share that takes place in a London hostel 5 years ago. There were two friends with me that were both male, and we were staying in a 9-bed mixed dorm. There were 3 sets of 3-tier bunk beds, and I was in the bottom bed of the right bunk. My first friend is on the top bunk, and my second friend is in the middle bunk. So we get in at 2 a.m, and all just quietly get into our beds. After a few minutes of lying there trying to sleep, I hear rustling behind me. I'm lying on my side facing the wall, so I think it's just someone going through their bag and I ignore it. Then I feel a hand on my hip over the cover, and I turned round and see it's a random guy telling me to move over and trying to pull up my cover. I initially thought he was drunk and wasn't sure which bed to be in, so I told him to go find his own bed, and then he shuffled away to the bottom bed of the left bunk. Then he comes back again. I tell him to go back to his own bed and he shuffles back to his own again. This happens another few times with me gradually speaking louder and getting less polite, telling him to piss off. I'm shaking because this situation is making me so nervous, and message my mate that's on the top bunk, saying I don't think I'm going to be able to sleep that night. He messages back casually thinking it's the cause of someone snoring. This is when I find out both my mates have earplugs in, and although they've heard me speaking, they each thought I was speaking to the other friend. So I tell him the situation and he starts keeping an eye out. I hear the guy go to the bathroom that's an ensuite, but I can tell from the light he's left the bathroom door open while doing so and refused to look. My mate fills me in that the guy was walking around with his pants down and deliberately left the door open to get me to look. But either way, the guy goes back to his bed after, and we think the situation is finally over. Then it happens again. My mate keeps an eye out, shines his phone light on the floor, and shouts for the guy to go away. Apparently he was crawling across the floor towards me. The guy suddenly takes offense at my mate's light shining on him and starts actually climbing the bunk ladder like King Kong to get on my mate, and was trying to take his phone. They wrestle for a while, with my mate actually kicking the guy in the neck to try to keep him away, only for the guy to swing backwards and come straight back at him again. I use this time to run for security, who find the guy still hanging on the bed when they get there, and they call for the police and have the guy taken away in a riot van and is banned from the building. While the police had dragged him outside waiting for the riot van, the guy even headbutted the brick wall several times. No idea what the guy was on, because it wasn't alcohol, but definitely something to take a kick to the neck and still act like nothing happened after. The guy kept trying to blame my mate when security came as well, saying things in broken English like, "Come up here and see how violent the guy is." My other mate had slept through the whole incident, kept saying that the next day he couldn't believe how friendly everyone in London was. Please don't let this put you off hostels though. I've travelled in them alone around Europe and never had any problems before. They're usually a great way to meet people or find activities to do in the local area. It was just a one-off creep. My uncle just got married in his 40s. It was his first marriage, and for their honeymoon, he, his wife, and her daughter, who's a special needs child and awesome, went to stay in a cabin on Big Bear Mountain in Southern California. They rented the cabin, unpacked all of their things, and settled in it for a 3-day stay. On the last night, my uncle was up watching TV very late. His wife and stepdaughter had gone to bed, and he had to use the restroom. So he gets up, goes to the restroom, does his business, and exits it. The only light on in the whole cabin is that in front of the TV in the living room, but it was bright enough to light up the whole living room and part of the hallway too. As he opened the door to the restroom, he saw his wife walk towards the kitchen. He figured she'd gotten up and was hungry, so he was going to go speak with her. He followed after her, and when she reached the end of the hallway, she turned slightly in the direction of the kitchen, and then, at warp speed, ran into it, faster than a human could move. This figure was wearing a long flowing white gown, similar to the one that his wife had worn to bed, and slightly longer than shoulder-length hair. Kinda wigged out, he took a few steps back and peeked into the room, where his wife and stepdaughter were asleep, and found both of them in bed. Needless to say, he couldn't sleep after that, and they left the next morning. He called up the guy that he had rented the cabin from and said, "Hey, you didn't tell me the cabin was haunted." The guy casually replied, "Oh, you saw her." Her, thought my uncle. He'd never specified what he'd seen, proving that he already knew a whacked-out speedster she-ghost was haunting the cabin. I stayed in a B&B in Pennsylvania that seemed cute enough. They did have a wall of antique dolls in the main room, but otherwise showed no signs of weirdness. That's until we settled into the room. I noticed some scratches on the floor near a bookcase, and after some inspection, realized it was a secret door. When I asked the owner, who gave a creepy vibe, if it worked, he said yes, and showed me that it opened to their office, which was a cluttered room with a computer and piles of crap. It had a lock on their side, and when I asked if there was a lock on my side, he smiled and simply said, "No." When I showed some concern that there was an unlockable entrance to my room that was camouflaged that they didn't tell me about, he just kept smiling. That night I was terrified and barricaded the door and barely slept. I was visiting New York City with my wife and 1-year-old. My brother had made the hotel reservation for us, and we thought it would be nice. We arrived and checked in, and then found our way to our room. The halls were a maze, and it took us a few minutes to find our room. It was pretty sketchy, but it was late and we were tired, so we began to settle in. My wife had brought some milk for our kid, and since the room didn't have a fridge, she asked me to take it to the front desk and ask them if they had a fridge we could use. I took the milk and headed into the maze of hallways, and I got a bit turned around but eventually found the elevator. I got in, hit the L button, and rode it down. When the door opened at the lobby, I was met with a dark, narrow hallway. I stupidly stepped out, confused as to what was going on. There were several doors on both sides of the hallway, but all were locked. I walked down the hallway and eventually started to hear music playing. After a few minutes, I turned a corner and almost ran into 2 big guys. I stopped and stared at them, wondering what the hell was going on. One of the two, after looking up and down at me, paused on the milk I was carrying and asked, "What are you doing here?" I stared for a few seconds and just said, "I'm trying to find the lobby." He then escorted me to the entrance of what turned out to be a strip club. After exiting, I saw the hotel about half a block up the street. Apparently, I took the elevator that the strippers would take with paying clients, and I had no idea. I thought I got lost in the Twilight Zone for a few minutes. After surviving a brutal 5-day work marathon with just a measly 10 hours of sleep, I jetted off abroad, exhaustion weighing heavily on me as I arrived to the motel, a dilapidated building with dark carpets and blankets. I was tired and barely registered the subpar conditions. With sleep claiming me almost immediately, I drifted off at around 8 p.m. local time. The shrill ring of the motel phone pierced through the silence and woke me up. On the other end, a voice claimed that there had been a noise complaint. Bewildered, I told them I had been soundly asleep and hadn't made any noise at all. The caller was persistent and questioned that perhaps there was someone else in the room with me. I told them there wasn't and fell back asleep without further incident. When I woke again, I felt a nagging sense of unease. Reflecting on what had just happened over the phone, why had the motel staff been so insistent on clarifying my solitary status? The realization dawned on me that the motel hadn't initiated the call at all. It seemed likely that someone had been systematically calling rooms, probing to determine the occupants and their numbers. Grateful for the extra security measure of the latch chain lock, I couldn't shake the feeling of relief that I had avoided whatever sinister intentions lay behind this mysterious caller. I worked in a haunted pub. There was a manager who got shot in a bar fight in the 20s, who you could see wandering up and down the bar every now and then. He was chill. The pub manager lived above the pub, and there was apparently a room you just did not go into. There was an old lady in there and she was evil, and apparently no one could stand being in there for more than a few minutes from just the atmosphere. We also used to get a lot of concerned women coming to the bar asking about the little girl in the bathroom on her own and to check on her. She would always stand right by the bathroom entrance. She liked to knock on the bathroom stall doors. She was pretty chill, just mischievous. In the early 2000s, I worked in a grand hotel and casino housed within a beautiful building constructed in the mid-1880s. Given its age and history, it wasn't uncommon for rumors of hauntings to circulate. There were always a few hallways and rooms on the second floor where eerie incidents occurred, with sightings of a mysterious object, sometimes grey or black in color. One afternoon shift, a colleague of mine called Michael had to be sedated by a paramedic due to extreme panic. I only heard about this story secondhand as I was working somewhere else at the time, but what I knew was that Michael had to be urgently taken to the hospital. According to Michael, he was cleaning the kitchen's hot section in preparation for the evening service when he encountered something unsettling. Alone and in the kitchen, he saw a dark shape without clear edges drift across the room and vanish into the adjoining area where mysterious objects had been spotted before. The figure made no sound, and Michael only noticed it because he caught it in his peripheral vision. He was a devout Catholic, and after that experience refused to work alone in that kitchen. Several months later, during a standard graveyard shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., I found myself tasked with entering the very room where sightings had occurred. It was around 3:40 a.m., and I braced myself for an eerie encounter. As I unlocked the door and stepped into the room, I was greeted by a mundane scene. A large bar fridge with a red Coke logo in the corner, surrounded by stacks of glasses and various other items. There was even a broken poker machine tucked away in another corner. The anticlimactic nature of this room struck me, and I couldn't help but chuckle to myself, thinking, of all of the rooms, this is the one you chose to haunt? In the end, Michael pursued a career as a bus driver, perhaps to get out of the hotel once and for all. I was staying in a chalet in the state of Maine, Vermont, with 3 others. The lady at the front desk was approximately 1 billion years old, with cloudy eyes, and her front desk was a small table next to a recliner in a room full of knickknacks and china dolls. The actual room was what I imagine a hotel room in the 40s would look like, and obviously had never been remodeled. The bathroom had a metal claw foot tub, and the worst part though was the door at the back of the room. I assumed it would be another closet, but we opened it and there was nothing but cold and darkness. We used the flashlight on our phones and discovered a long, wide, cement-walled hallway. I assumed it was used to travel between rooms when the weather was bad, but the vibe it gave off was making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The night went smoothly and nothing ever happened, but I still feel like we survived a night in a boring horror movie. I tried to look for it again, but with no results. I have to ask my grandma who booked the trip. She managed to find a review on Orbitz. Room was okay, bathroom was clean and modern, but a few things had bothered us. One were the flies in the room. Not many, but we did have to squat several before we could go to sleep. Each room has a back door to an unlit hallway, and when we arrived to the room, that door was unlocked and wide open. We closed and locked it, of course, and in our second room, the back door was closed but unlocked, so we locked it. When we came back later that evening, the door was unlocked again. Needless to say, we were spooked. We hadn't left anything in the room during the evening, so nothing was taken or disturbed, but I would still not go back. Thank you for staying at Hotel Le Mort. We hope you have enjoyed your experience. You can leave your review in the review book down below. And if you would like to join our Executive Mort Club, you can find the links in the description to do so. And a huge thank you, as always, to our existing members for their generous contributions to the establishment. But that's it from me. Until next time.